Alright, I'm back on my Forbidden Rite shenanigans. Now, if you're just here for time codes and such, you can check them below. We'll do a little bit of an intro, and then we'll get into some of the core pieces of the build and such. But mind you, this is not an in-depth guide. This is not a walkthrough. This is me showing you that I have stepped back into Forbidden Rite, and this is my early stages of the multi-stage process of getting Forbidden Rite to the end game and absolutely blowing up the entire world with it. Now, I, however, decided to perhaps take a different approach to the early stages. Because Forbidden Rite, if you want to do it the way I often enjoy doing it, which you can find in the previous videos, is fairly expensive. But I like Forbidden Rite, and I don't want to wait an entire league before I get to really juice it. So I've been looking around, and I've kind of been messing around with some concepts, and it seems to be successful. You're looking at a low damage version right now because I've mostly invested in just getting the character to be fast and tanky. And this is, by the way, without spell suppress on gear. This is in an incredible disorganized state. We'll go a little bit over that in the gearing section. But this is just me tanking with some basic gear, some basic crafted gear, give or take the wand. And it is pretty damn tanky. I'm picking up some horrible mods just to prove my point. You might be able to pause the video across certain eldritch altars and you see that I just click the worst possible mods for this build and I'm not dying. Also, that boss had permanent spell suppress and I'm on a low damage version and he still went down in an acceptable amount of time. I also have horrible damage mods on my map and I'm still staying alive, and that's my main goal. Go fast and staying alive, because ultimately things will die, but they won't die if you're dead. Now I'm going to be working on getting some more levels and optimizing the damage and getting the gear sorted, but of course that requires some currency and some farming. But let me go through some of the gear, show you how the character works and how you can get Forbidden Rite online on a much cheaper budget. So before we talk about the gear, the gems, and of course the passive tree, just a warning once again, my character is a hot mess right now. It is tanky, it is fast, and it does decent damage, but nowhere near enough, especially not for the level of investment that we're going to aim for. This is kind of a step one character progression kind of video. So don't take this as gospel, don't take this as a guide. Just enjoy what I am kind of coming up with for solutions, and perhaps be inspired, or suggest, or do anything that isn't trying to recreate this character, because it's going to change rapidly and quickly and hopefully for the better in the near future. I already have got some really important pieces ready. I just have to farm up for a certain unique before I can switch it all up. But right now, as it stands, step one, make it work, before step two, which is make it work better, is, of course, the Mahoxal Machination Steel Kite Shield. This is what makes step one possible, make it work. This allows us to do a bunch of unique interactions with one another based on the keystones that are found on the shield, which normally can only be found either on certain unique places on the tree, like Valpact, or found on keystone transformations through the Timeless Jewels. Now, it is very confusing, and honestly, if I'm going to be truthful with you, I don't understand half of it. I just know it works, and I trust the process. So, if you want to go to the wiki and read up on it, good luck and have fun. But this shield allows us to actually get a bunch of defenses up, like through Divine Flesh, for example, but also allows us to actually use our Overleech effects, which we can leverage from our Life Flask to get more max res, and also allows us to do a bunch of other unique things, like filling up our energy shield, which we can then leverage for Eldritch Battery, which we can get through the flask without having to scale all the way to the top on the passive tree. It's confusing, but I'll show you what it does. Right now, I have no mana. I have no energy shield. It's 0, right? It doesn't regen. Now, due to the delightful passive notable for the Ascendancy, Master Surgeon, we can kind of get an enduring effect on our Life Flask. So we can do this, and as you can see, it has like this effect. It shows up, and it doesn't run out when we are full health. This is also made possible because of a cluster, Mender's Wellspring. If you have Mender's Wellspring, you can actually press your life flask when you're full health. Without this, it seems to bug out. It doesn't allow for that to happen. Presumably because you're full health, and why would you want to press your health button when you're full health? Or so the game thinks. But with this Ascendancy Master Surgeon, we have the ability to have essentially an enduring life flask, which allows us to then also trigger our second flask, Replica Sorrow of the Divine, which gives us the Eldritch Battery effect during the actual effect of the Silver Flask. But also, life recovery from flasks also applies to Energy Shield during effect. 50% increased duration. This gives us our Energy Shield, but we are not generating Energy Shield right now because we need our life flask to be active. And as you can see, we get this. And every single time it goes up, it resets, which gives us the Everlasting Sacrifice buff, massively increasing our max resistance, including, but not limited to, Chaos and Fire, which is pretty much our defensive layer. Now, unfortunately, as you can see, it also stops, so you have to press your life flask again. It's kind of an active loop. But once you have that loop going, you are constantly healing. You are not going to kill yourself if you have enough Chaos defenses, because you're constantly healing as a life flask, and you have enough mana to cast your Forbidden Rite because you have the Eldritch Battery effect. And you kind of sustain that while increasing your defenses. Very important for Forbidden Rite. Now, that's kind of how that works. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that kind of interact with one another. But like I said, go for the wiki and figure it out because I'm confused. But other than that, we also have a wonderful wand. +1/+1 multi-mod. Not worth it. I would recommend strongly to use the Rune Dagger craft I have on my video playlist. It's better. I will ultimately probably switch to that as well and just sell this one because it's not worth it and it has way too high int. But you can see it's red int. So why is that? Well, we have less than that int, but we can actually use it because of these new particular necklaces that have come out. We're actually getting our ashes from Wish, so to speak. Forbidden Rite +3, some all res, some increased reservation, and reduced attribute requirements, which of course is phenomenal because the more attributes we have available, the more tattoos we can leverage. That's kind of the idea behind this necklace for my decision. On top of that, we have, of course, an oldie but a goodie, the Doppelganger's Guy's Sadist Garb at a max roll 40%. No weird corruptions yet. Remember, never go insane, always stay sane. Gives us the regen and the physical and chaos damage mitigation that we desperately want. I also tried out the Fourth Vow for a bit, which was lovely. It definitely works, but I couldn't stand Arcanist Brand. I wanted to have automated curses, so I went with the Doppelganger's Guys, and we'll see the gem setup in just a second. On top of that, we also have the Anathema Moonstone Ring. I will probably switch away from this, but right now it's really nice for triple curse. I kind of was messing around with that. I will most likely switch this out and stick with a double curse, but we'll see how that goes and how that feels and what I have available in terms of socket pressure. But this is really cheap and really nice. Gives us the cast speed, some much needed intelligence due to the unfortunate level of the wand that I crafted this at a lower base. It would have required less int, but alas, you have to make do with what you can find. And of course, the triple curse does allow us to get Enfeeble up, which of course is incredible for defensive purposes. We also have, in terms of like rare gear, we have the helm. As you can see, just mana reservation. It has a spark enchantment. That's the one I found in Uber. Ultimately, I want to get spell suppress on this naturally, and I want to turn that mana reservation in the implicit to presumably, I think either fire or chaos damage taken as. I think it's chaos. Of course, I also want to get that craft fire damage, physical taken as fire damage, and I want a mana reservation enchantment. I need to figure out how the mana actually runs out because of the new necklace and of course the tattoos that we have access to. But it might be a mana reservation enchantment, maybe otherwise a curse improvement on temporal or despair. We'll see kind of how things turn out. But as you can see, it's just essentially life, mana reservation, and some resistances. Like, it's really just bare bones. In terms of gloves, it's not even an evasion base, so I can't even have spell suppress, which is what I definitely want. I was unable to actually hit 15% chance to poison on it, so I had to do some changes to get my poison chance to 100%. On top of that, it's just chaos res, some life, and much needed strength. That's pretty much it. It's very bare bones. We have the boots, no spell suppress again, but we do have 25% movement speed, I wish I had more. 35% chance to avoid elemental ailments right now, because we also have one of the unique jewels that allow us to leverage elemental ailments through spell suppress. And of course, a little bit of life, some poison, faster action speeds, really bare bones. This is all going to be perfect spell suppress, and then with like one tattoo or maybe one extra skill point or a mastery, because our base will our chest is also evasion based, we can actually just max out our spell suppress that way in with minimal effort. On top of that, in terms of the belt, this is very important. We have an incredible belt. I got very lucky with this craft. We have tier 1 chaos rest, tier 1 reduced flask charges, tier 1 increased flask effect duration. I would have preferred flask charges gained, but it is what it is. We did hit chaos damage on the slam with the exalt. I was hoping for max life tier 1, obviously. Crafted life, but more importantly also the flask effect increased with the reduced flask charges penalty on top of that, which is the unveil one, but it is what it is. I'm very happy with this belt, and I'm hoping that with the tattoos for flask effect duration, I can keep my flasks up permanently depending on which ones I will end up running. Not sure if I'm going to be running Undying Sun or not. Maybe I can find a good rolled one for not too expensive, but we'll see how it turns out. First, make it work, then make it work better after all. We also have a nice Abyssal Jewel for Corrupted Blood. That's literally all it is. I wish it had phasing and maybe some life, but I don't want to die first and foremost. I'll then figure out the rest. So that's very cheap as well. Oh, and the ring. This is just a very basic ring that I had because I needed Chaos Res, obviously. I needed some more intelligence because of the high requirement of my wand, since I crafted it on the wrong base, because I'm silly. It had some nice life, and more importantly, it also had the tier 1 life per enemy hit with spells, and Forbidden Rite is many hits, as well as any potential other hits we do. Just nice life, and a little bit of rarity, because, you know, that's totally going to help you find that mage blood, he said sarcastically. In terms of flask, yeah, we have saturated divine life flask. That's what I would recommend. It's good stats for good duration. Also allows us to become stun immune with this craft, which is very nice. Because my other build might not have necessarily traditional stun immunity. It simply means if we stunned, we can still attack because of the cluster node, but this just actually means we're stun immune while this flask is active, which pretty much should always be, as long as you keep pressing that button every 5 seconds, which is frustrating to keep doing, but it is part of the build. The replica Sora of the Divine, mandatory of course, good duration, pretty much up indefinitely. We're using a silver flask with some movement speed and increased charge recovery. It's not up all the time, but for bosses, but it's pretty much up all the time for mapping. It does not go down easily though, so don't worry too much about that. We have enough flask charge sustained for that with increased charge recovery. Just a basic increased charge recovery Quicksilver. I was looking at some defensive flasks, but I wanted to go fast, so I can actually improve this flask way more and get more out of it, because this is literally nothing except for 18% charge recovery, and the Freeze Shock Ignite doesn't do anything. But this was a thing I had left over from early leveling, so as you can see, it requires level 9, so I need to fix that. Early days, as well as a mandatory Ruby Flask with a nice boost to duration. I think it's tier 1, yep, and as well as a tier 1 cast speed. Now, of course, in the end, hopefully we can turn this into an Alchemist variant, which will give us more effect. But that's kind of it for the gear. So how have we filled the sockets on this build? Let's start at the top at the helm, the auras. Enlightened support. I want to have an Enlightened 4 here, which will open up some opportunities for me. Divergent Malevolence speaks for itself. Grace, and of course, Purity of Fire. For those who have not read the wiki, real quickly, the shield in combination with the keystone here, tempered by war, you can pause the video, allows us to take a 100% of cold damage and lightning damage through fire damage, as well as a little bit of chaos shenanigans through things such as divine flesh. As you can see, 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos damage, and then of course the rest of the 50% goes through fire here, making it so that 100% of the cold lightning damage we take is converted through our increased max fire and max chaos. So we clearly can push that even further. But that's why we're running Purity of Fire, which still needs another level, and then a Corruption to level 21 preferably, in case there was any confusion on that. In the weapon, we have Purifying Flame, Divergent. Divergent is mandatory here. If you don't have Divergent, don't use Purifying Flame. It doesn't matter because we already have Consecrated Ground from Sorrow, of course. We also are meming with Void Sphere. Typically, you want to have Blazing Salvo or Forbidden Rite if you have a Stasis Prison. But Void Sphere is kind of funny because it allows you to pull people together and away from your allies during the League mechanic. And it actually saved my life during mapping when I was trying to clear Beyond, because they just get sucked in and pushed away from me. And then I can walk away because I don't have phasing yet. Very lovely. But it's more of a me. Take Blazing Salvo. Don't pay attention. Cast with damage taken, of course, is very lovely because we have decided to go with Doubleganger over Fourth Vow, which allows us to do some damage to ourselves, which does also mean we can regen it better. It's what Doubleganger is really good at. But it allows us to leverage cast when damage taken, which allows us to do things like Purifying Flame. But also, it allows us to do the Anomalous Enfeeble, Despair, and Temporal Change on a cast when damage taken. It doesn't go off constantly, so it doesn't really help with clear, but it does help on bosses because it's automated. Normally, people will use Arcanist Brand here, and then you have to self-cast it. But Arcanist Brand self-casting doesn't last very long, and it's also super slow, and it's annoying. You can't use it on tougher mobs constantly either because it's just too damn slow for clear. This is just automated. It goes off every 1 or 2 seconds right now based on the damage I do to myself. And of course, if I take damage from the enemy, it goes off even faster. So the more I take damage, the more they get debuffed. It's very lovely. And on bosses, if you're fighting them, it's always up permanently in this setup. So it's going to be improved. It's going to get smoothed out. But right now, it actually works better than Arcanist Brand, in my opinion. But to each their own. If I was using Fourth Vow, I wouldn't be able to do this because I had to use Arcanist Brand, because with Fourth Vow, you literally don't take enough damage to trigger it even on a level 1 gem. It's wild. On top of that, on the shield, before I forget, we have Divergent Herald of Agony, mandatory to get poison chance. Divergent Arctic Armor. When we cast with Forbidden Rite, we're standing still, so why not add a little bit of defenses to that? Ultimately, perhaps I am thinking about maybe getting another 50% aura in, maybe some other stuff. I've seen people mess around with a lot of projectile speed. Maybe I'll experiment with that. We'll figure it out, depending on how tanky I get on my other version. Flame Dash, that's my go-to. Flame Dash, well, my go-to typically is Frostblink, but Flame Dash I think is just objectively better due to it having more charges. But pick your favorite here. I don't use Shield Charge because you saw me walking around during the gameplay. I think that if you need more speed than this, that's okay, but I think I'm already sometimes going so fast I lose track of my character. So I don't need Shield Charge, which opens up 2 sockets, which is very comfy, which allows me to get an Immortal Call in. We do have Enduring Composure, so we are generating endurance charges after we hit ourselves, as you might have noticed, so we can leverage that as well. Just very comfy. We are doing this in an increased duration support to make it last a little longer. We are not doing armor. If you do Fourth Vow, you do Mortal Shell. But if you have no armor, Mortal Shell doesn't scale, and Steel Skin is too weak, so Immortal Coal works really, really nice, and it lasts long enough to bridge the gap between enduring charges being down while they generate back up and the buff being active. It's very, very comfy. Divine Blessing support for our haste. It's also a Val haste. So on my left click, I have Val haste, so it just goes off whenever it's up, and I keep my haste active. It lasts about 20 plus seconds right now, but I can improve that with quality and higher level durations and whatnot. And of course, I already talked about the curses. And in terms of the 6 link, we have Anomalous GMP. Regular GMP should be fine for this setup. Anomalous GMP is mandatory for the setup I'm planning to build into. Hence, I already have taken use of it. Don't you, unless you, for this setup, it perhaps might be better to go with Woke GMP, but not necessary. It really is not necessary. GMP normal 1 is going to be, like the normal GMP is fine. Void Manipulation, it should be a Woke Void Manipulation, but money. Awaken Deadly Ailments, I'm leveling that, just for damage, just really good. Forbidden Rite, obviously, level 21, 20% quality. In a perfect world, I would prefer one of the old qualities of Forbidden Rite. Although, if we're going to mess around with projectile speed, perhaps a regular Forbidden Rite might be just fine. But the alt quality gives us increased AoE, which is just comfy for clear and such. So we'll see how things go and what I hit and what I can purchase and what I can afford. Anomalous Spell Echo, because the cast speed. Don't go with Woke or any kind of other version, because spell damage doesn't increase poison damage. So don't do any craziness like that. Just get the Anomalous, get more cast speed, which is so comfy and so mandatory on this build. And of course we have Unbound Ailments. I want the Woke version, but money, and we'll get there. So that's kind of what the gems are about. It's pretty self-explanatory, aside from like one meme thing. So let's talk a little bit about the passive tree. Ascendancy-wise, Pathfinder, obviously. No flesh or flame jewels yet. Master Toxicist, Prolif, more damage. Nature's Reprisal, Wither with increased effect Wither. Incredible. Flask Charges, obviously. And then Master Surgeon. All of this is pretty bloody mandatory. I will ultimately hope to change away from a build that doesn't require Master Surgeon. And then maybe I can pick up Nature's Boon to further enhance my flasks like Onslaught. Because Onslaught does scale with Flask effect now if it comes from your flask. That was changed a leak or two ago. And that's going to be amazing. We're going to go even faster. We're going to attack even faster. Everything is going to die faster. We're going to be awesome. It's going to be good. On top of that, right now, as you can see, we have the basic pathing on the top. We pick up Heart of Oak, which helps us stay stun immune. Of course, with things like Divine Flask being active through Master Surgeon. We also pick up Ballistics with a added increased armor because of the gem. We also pick up Charisma with the increased strength, not mandatory, but it's nice with all the tattoos being around, of course. We also pick up Revenge of the Hunted for life, not for the spell suppress, but it also allows us to get some conversion, which is really, really good on this interpretation of the build, because we don't have like raw physical damage through armor, except for like the 40 on the actual chest. That's really, really nice. And then we also have another 5 here with wasting. We also pick up some max chaos res. Very straightforward. The mastery here is increased damage, but it's entirely up to you if you want. If you have an evasion glove, I would have been able to pick up the 15% here on that mastery, but I was able to not do that yet when I was setting up the character to make it work. Let's go to the exciting stuff on the right first. Careful Conservationist, more flask stuff. We are picking up Fatal Toxins, and we also pick up the poison hit. On my glove, I was not able to hit 15%, so I have to make sure I pick up all the poison chance on the tree. We also are crit immune, as long as they're poisoned. Very, very good. I'm working towards Blood Drinker here, and ultimately want to pick up the Jewel Socket and maybe some Circle of Life with some pathing optimization. In terms of cluster, we have Touch of Cruelty, just comfy. Unspeakable Gift, that's the explosion source. We have Brute for Potency, damage over time flash charges gained. With Septic Spells, this helps us get closer to 20%. In a perfect world, I hope to get rid of this, but all in due time. On top of that, we also have Born of Chaos, which allows us to get more max chaos res, and that's going to be huge for us. Peak Vigor for more life. Mender's Wellspring keeps our life flask alive, but also overrides the health flask block. Because if you are full life, you typically can't, depending on the life flask you have. In this case, if you have just increased amount recovered, you can't press it unless you have another effect attached to it that is like bleed immunity or something, or bleed removal through Mender's Wellspring. We could also go with a different flask here as opposed to 50%, and then we won't need Mender's Wellspring, but it's really good regardless due to the fact that it also increases life recovery and gives us life flask charges, and it's important to keep our loop going. Also Enduring Composure. We are hitting ourselves constantly, so it's very, very good. Permanent Endurance charges. We pick up pretty much all the spell suppress we can find. We also have picked up Ancestral Vision to help with the Avoid Elemental Ailments. More life here for Herbalism. We also go all the way to Quickstep for more spell suppress, because we don't have spell suppress on gear, right? So I have to get as much as I can from the tree. Speaking on the tree, going down, Natural Remedies speaks for itself. We go through the top, Flask Effect Duration. Check POB if perhaps, depending on your flask setup, if flask charges used might be better. It oftentimes might be, depending on the numbers, if you have the different Timeless Jewel, but we don't have that right now. We also pick up Entrench, more spell suppress. We finish the entire wheel because spell suppress. And then also Thick Skin because of life and Avoid Elemental Ailments. Mandatory. in all versions we're probably going to run. Already talked about wasting. We pick up the innards because of all the stats. Ultimately, I hope to go through the outside, so I can pick up things like Mind Drinker for maybe reduced mana cost of skills, or otherwise mana reservation. Definitely Circle of Life. Recoup is incredible, and the Mastery right there. So we'll see how that goes. Might even pick up some other tech. We'll see. But right now we'll go through the middle to get all the stats. We also pick up some Melding for life and energy shield to facilitate greater reserves. We also go all the way around and then pick up Influence and also Serpentine Spellslinger. Now hopefully, once we get the gloves sorted with an actual evasion base, we can go to the right side, and also means we can drop this cluster and get a better one, or perhaps optimize our tree further. I am thinking about maybe going through the inside here, picking up Instinct if I need to, or just finish off this, cut this point right here. But I went here regardless as a result of maybe getting another cluster in. But we'll see how that turns out once I get some spell suppress on my gear and I can optimize this tree. But as you can see, it's very much a mess right now. Like, these points shouldn't exist. You should go through the outside. So the inside here should not exist, depending on how you build. Like, I don't even think that this wheel should even exist in our tree, or it should be spec'd in our tree, or at least not the entirety of it. So there's a lot of optimization to be done still, but that's kind of what the idea is. Just picking up defenses, sustain, getting our aura sorted, and our cluster jewel set up for all the mandatory effects and quality of life. So that's kind of it. Hopefully you kind of have a good idea of what I'm doing here to kickstart the character. We are farming tier 16s. We can juice them quite delightfully already. I wouldn't go full delirium 80% quite yet, but all in due time, I can do enough to start making some currency and hopefully see some big improvements in the near future. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time, or on Twitch if you pop in to see how things are going. Have a good night. I'm out.